Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Little tongue tied there. Um, it's Thursday evening, the 29th, and just thought about a lot about where I'm going to go with this YouTube channel. Thought about a lot today, and I don't want to get into politics. I don't want. I don't. I want the channel to be a pleasant, happy place. And politics are not a pleasant, happy place. So I want to talk about things that people like and uh, that people do, and as everyday things that aren't controversial, that don't make trouble, don't cause trouble. Uh, I'd like for this channel to be a place where you can come and discuss a topic and be pleasant. So I don't. I'm absolutely a right-centered person, and I believe in the old-fashioned America, what it used to be, and I believe in common sense. I believe you shouldn't do things against the law, but there's a lot of that going on right now. So I don't want to get involved in it. If you want to watch that, you can watch plenty of it on TV. It's all over social media. Um, so you can watch those other guys that talk about this stuff all the time, and if that's what you want to do. But I don't want to talk about that here. I want to talk about life and how much fun life is. Uh, One of the things that I thoroughly enjoyed my whole life was automobiles. And let me tell you a little story. I remember the first time that, and I was just a little guy. I remember the first time that I was totally impressed with an automobile. My father had a friend that came to visit him, and he had this gigantic Packard, big, huge touring car, Packard. And we're talking in the mid 40s. This thing had gigantic wheels on it. They were taller than I was. And right in the middle was this great big silver hubcap with a red hexagon in it, like the head of a bolt. But the whole car was just massive. And I remember parked out in front of our house, and I walked around it and was just amazed by the size of this car. Remember, I'm just a little guy, probably 5, 6 years old, and this car is just fascinating the heck out of me. But later on, my father's friend said, "Let's go for a ride." This is an unbelievable car. I got up in the back seat with my dad, and my dad's friend drove us around for a while. This back seat was the size of a small living room, and it had pull down tables, had fancy little lights inside. It was an amazing car. So this car was probably remember this is mid 40s. This car was probably uh, early 30s, maybe 32, 1930, 31, something like that. So it was probably about 15 years old. Not really old for a car, but uh, I remember being totally fascinated with that car. And I think that was the beginning of my love for automobiles. Uh, and I've I've owned since I had my first car at 16 years old, and I've owned about somewhere around 150 cars in my life, all different, all different sizes, shapes, trucks, sedans, you name it, sports cars, convertibles, hardtops, you name it. There was always something. I was never satisfied with one I had. I always wanted another one. I wanted something different. Uh, I remember sitting at the stoplight one day with my late wife beside me, and there was a car coming down the other side of the street, and I was talking about how much I liked that car. She said, "Are you never satisfied with what you have? I mean, you've got a really nice car. Why aren't you satisfied with what you have?" And I said, "Nope, never satisfied with what I have. I like what I have, but maybe I like that one better." So kind of the story of my life, you know. So that's why my channel is called Never Satisfied. Motorcycles, had numerous motorcycles. Um, I never had a boat because I don't like boats. Uh, my father was a fisherman, and he had a small boat, small motor, and he used to take me fishing with him when I was a little kid, and we would stay out all day long. And by the time the day was over, I was so sick of that boat, I didn't ever want to get in another boat. But I went with him numerous times. By the time I became 13, 14 years old, I didn't ever want to get in another boat. I don't like boats. I don't like being on the water all day. It's not my thing. So then when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I became highly interested in airplanes. I still do love airplanes, but I started building model airplanes with gas engines on them, and gliders, and even jet-powered aircraft, that type of thing. By the time I was 11 or 12, I had several opportunities to go up in a private aircraft and fly around with some pilots that were friends of ours. And I remember being so excited the first time that I got to go up in an aircraft. It was a Stinson, what was called a Stinson stagecoach, I think. That's what it was. But anyway, it was a 4-place high-wing aircraft, single engine. And we were at an automobile race on an airport, and this guy was, flying people around for a few bucks. My dad said, "You like airplanes? Let's go for a ride." I said, "Okay." I was never so surprised in my life at how boring that was. We're sitting up there, and they're probably, I don't know how high those airplanes were flying around, but probably maybe 3,000 or 4,000 foot, maybe. I don't know. Oklahoma's pretty flat, so didn't have to worry about running into any mountains. But anyway, I looked down, and it's like we're standing still. There's no sense of speed. There's no. And I looked at the speed indicator, and we're going 120 miles an hour or something like that. And I look at the speed indicator, and I look down. It's like we're hanging, not moving. At that particular point in time, I said, "No, this ain't for me. If I'm going to be flying an airplane, I'm going to be flying down about 50 foot off the ground." So, and it wasn't for me. But I liked the sensation of that you got from turning and banking and all that kind of stuff. So if you like this sense of speed, the sensation of speed, and you like that turning and banking, it's got to be a motorcycle. So I rode my first motorcycle at 14 and fell in love with them. I owned motorcycles my whole life and cars. And so just anything with an engine on it that you can drive down the highway or off the highway, that doesn't matter to me. You know, I like off-road and highway vehicles. But I just love motor vehicles. And I still like airplanes, but I just don't like to go up in them because they're not something that I care to do. Uh, I love the way they look. I like the way they sound, but I don't want to fly in them. So anyway, as I was growing up, my father was always. I always looked at my father as a really macho guy. You know, I mean, he was. I wanted to be like my father. Whatever he did, you know, he was always building things and fixing things, and he was he was always trading cars. He didn't work on them like I did. I worked on them and I built a few cars and customized a few cars. He wasn't interested in that. He just wanted a different car every now and then. So I'm a chip off the old block. But I remember when I was a little kid, I used to stand up in the back floorboard. We always had a four-door car, four-door sedan. And I remember as a kid, I used to stand up in the back floorboard right behind my father and peer over his shoulder while he drove the car. And I was just like, wow, I can't wait to do that. I can't wait till the time I can do this. And so I watched his every move. I watched how he shifted gears. How I watched even how I even watched how he had his feet on the pedals. You know, it's all this stuff always fascinated me to no end. Especially we had I remember we had an old Plymouth that as the speedometer went up from zero, had a little light on the end of the needle and it was green. And then when it got to about 45 or something like that, it turned yellow. And then when it went on up and it hit 55, it turned red. So you were in the red zone at 55 miles an hour, so whatever. So you need to be careful because that speedometer is red now. But so anyway, all of that stuff was really fascinating to me. I could not wait until I could get behind the steering wheel and drive a car for myself. And I have loved driving cars my whole life. I love it. I know it's one of the great pleasures and one of the great privileges in my life of being able to drive a car, go wherever I want, see whatever I want to see, and just get out on the open road and travel. I think if you look at my YouTube page, you'll see the highway at the top, at the banner across the top, that I took in Arizona several years ago. The road was straight as an arrow forever, and so there wasn't any traffic. I mean, there was none, as far as you could see. So I just pulled my car over, stood out on the yellow line, and took a picture. I've been all over the western half of the United States, traveling, as far east as Missouri, Arkansas, and East Texas, almost Louisiana. Actually, I've crossed over into Louisiana a little bit. So I've never driven in the southern states, but always driven in the south central and west. And the western United States has the most spectacular roads that you'll never see any more spectacular scenery than on western highways, especially in the northwest. And I've driven all over every state every state in the western United States, and over and over again. And I've really, really loved that experience. I lived in Southern California for 30 years, and one of my favorite trips was going up Pacific Coast Highway all the way to Seattle. I did that 4 or 5 times, and I always loved that. Always loved that road. Pacific Coast Highway is so gorgeous, especially up around San Simeon and Carmel, all up in there. Just, oh my goodness, it doesn't get more beautiful. So I've traveled Route 66. I've probably logged in about 80 or 90,000 miles on Route 66, the old Route 66, before they broke it up, before I-40 was there. When I got old enough to in Oklahoma, I grew up in Oklahoma. When I got old enough that I could make that trip, I made that trip to California, Southern California, on Route 66, and that was quite an experience. Route 66 was pretty dangerous. It was a very narrow 2-lane road, and if you were traveling out there at night, which I did a lot, you were traveling out there at night, the semis would go by in the opposite direction, and there were just maybe a couple of feet between you and that semi truck, and it was pretty scary, but it was fun. It was really fun. The first trip I made from Oklahoma to Southern California was in a 1953 Studebaker Starlight Coupe. It was a very little low Studebaker, 1953. It had a V8 engine with a 3-speed with an overdrive. Great gas mileage, great little car, and it was hot. It was extremely. I traveled across the desert in that car in the summertime. There was no air conditioning, and it was blistering hot out of the desert, and the floorboards would get so hot you'd have to keep your feet wet. Have a bottle of water and pour on your feet so that you could keep your feet on the pedals. That's how hot it was. But it was fun. So I started driving, crossing that desert at night, crossing Mojave at night. That makes a lot more sense. But it's been my greatest pleasure to be able to drive all of these years on all of these beautiful highways in America. I've crossed the Rocky Mountains numerous times, crossed the Cascades numerous times, been up and down the coast, I've driven into Canada and over into Montana and Wyoming, North and South Dakota. It doesn't get more beautiful than that. So that's the reason. That's what I want to. I want to talk about happy things. I don't want to talk about all this ugliness going on. It's too many people that are involved in hate right now. Everybody hates everybody. Yeah, it gets pretty tiresome. Yeah, I'd rather not be involved in it on my own channel. We'll pretend that doesn't exist while we're talking about the things I want to talk about. Now, that being said, I've done a whole lot of things in my life. Been a lot of places. So if there's something that you would like to talk about and something you would want me to talk about, put it in the comments below, and I read them every day. So put it in the comments below, and we'll generate a video based on your topic that you want to talk about. I'll even do some research on it. If I don't know about it, I'll do some research on it and we'll discuss it. But let me check this time here. Okay. Well, I try to keep these videos under 30 minutes so that people don't fall asleep. But again, uh, if you like to drive like I do, and if you love cars the way I do, you come to the right place, because we're going to do a lot of talking about that. Uh, there's a couple of cars that I always wanted to own, never did. Um, most of my cars were just working man's cars. I never owned any exotic cars. Uh, I never did own any European sports cars. Oh, I take that back. I had several British sports cars. Uh, and surprisingly, everybody talks about how bad British sports cars are, but one of the most reliable cars and one of the most fun cars I ever owned was the Triumph TR7 Roadster. That was a marvelous car. We had a ball in that car. We drove it everywhere. Never had any problems with it. Another interesting car that I had that we drove all over, and everybody thought, oh, they're terrible. They're always fixing it. Matter of fact, people say that Fiat, Fiat, stands for Fix It Again, Tony. But the Fiat I had, was a little roadster, a 124 Spider. We drove it all over Southern California, up the coast, across the desert, all over the place. Never broke down. Always brought us home. So it's all about making sure your cars are in good condition. So we'll talk about that too, about keeping your car in good condition and what you need to do to make sure that you can drive it and enjoy it, and you don't suffer some catastrophic breakdown out in the middle of nowhere. But I hope you enjoyed this. I have a lot more to talk about as far as automobiles and motorcycles. Um, I had the last motorcycle I owned was a beautiful motorcycle, and we'll talk about that in the future. I I owned a lot of motorcycles. I never owned a Harley Davidson. I just never cared for Harley Davidson. I've ridden several of them. The first motorcycle I ever rode in my life was a Harley Davidson 74 Panhead. That's the first motorcycle I ever rode, 14 years old. Never been on a motorcycle in my life. The guy says, you want to take this for a ride? I said, sure. He showed me what to do, and away I went. 14 years old. My dad was going to buy it for me. So I don't know, I don't remember what happened, but I didn't own it. I didn't end up with that motorcycle. But that was the very first motorcycle I ever rode. It's a big motorcycle ride for your first time. So we'll talk more about this in the future, and we'll talk about other things that you want to talk about. So like I said, if you want to talk about a particular subject, a happy subject, not politics. I don't want to talk politics. I get enough of that every day, watching the news. So leave a comment down below, and we'll take a look at it. So anyway, good night. Thank you very much for watching. This is an exciting thing I'm doing. For me, it's a very exciting thing to do. And I can't wait to make more videos. I really enjoy it. Hope you do too. Good night. God bless.